program was recorded at RILA's annual logistics conference in Orlando, Florida. I'm pleased to welcome Editor-in-Chief of Supply Chain Brain, Russell Goodman.
Supply chain sustainability. Joining us for a conversation on that today is James Jack, Executive Director of the Coalition for Responsible Transportation. Welcome, James.
Well, thank you very much.
James, it might be fair to say that some of the viewers are not entirely familiar with the Coalition for Responsible Transportation. So give us an idea. What is it, what's it about, and what's its mission?
The Coalition for Responsible Transportation is a group of leading national supply chain members, and that includes retailers, importers, exporters, ocean carriers, and trucking companies. And the one issue that CRT members are committed towards is environmental sustainability in port activities. And really, the CRT has taken a new approach to facilitating dialogue with port leadership, with local communities that these ports are operating in, and with policymakers at the local, state, and federal level. And really, the main point is that CRT exists to facilitate a proactive compliance attitude on clean air issues. This is something that allows CRT to go into port communities and to help local ports develop industry-supported clean truck programs that meet local goals for environmental improvement, but that also allow the flexibility for businesses to operate in a manner that's efficient and cost-effective. And one of the things in so doing that we're able to do is really enhance the profile of the shipping community by illustrating different initiatives as far as environmental sustainability are concerned of our member companies.
James, I think there's no contest that sustainability is something that has zoomed to top of mind throughout the nation. To what do you attribute that?
Well, certainly sustainability is not a new issue with regard to retail operations or the supply chain in general, but in recent years, the focus has really begun to emerge on port-level related activities. And we're talking about the environmental footprint of maritime trade. And as we've seen in recent years, and this was a phenomenon that really began in Southern California, that environmentalists, that community justice advocates, that labor, and other stakeholders really began to focus on port sustainability as a major effort with regard to overall supply chain practices. And there was no question that port-related emissions usually in port communities were much higher than they were in surrounding areas. And so right about the same time that port sustainability really began to emerge as a top-tier issue, the retail community began to embrace it as well. And certainly we know retailers have a number of sustainability efforts that are taking place at the corporate level. Sustainability is a very important concept for many retailers and their service providers. And so what we saw was an opportunity to really engage on the debate and work with policymakers as they began to focus on supply chain sustainability specifically.
I'm glad you mentioned retailers because clearly they've got a large stake in this. Walk us through that. What is the interest of retailers? What's the impact on retailers? What are they doing about this?
Absolutely. Well, I think the impact is manifold. I think it can be summed up in a phrase that a retail colleague of mine once told me, which is, if you're not helping to plan the menu, chances are you're going to end up on it. And I think certainly that holds true with regard to sustainability efforts at the ports. We have seen a number of proposals that have been both regulatory and legislative that have been very onerous and very costly and could very significantly impact the bottom line of retailers who are operating in these port communities. And many of these proposals have been done in the name of environmental mitigation. And so it became clear to the industry that unless the industry is at the table and has a seat in helping to navigate the path that ports were taking with regard to environmental sustainability, they could be faced with onerous and costly mandates and burdens that would drive up their bottom line. So the impact was clear that retailers and their service providers needed to have a seat at the table so that we could proactively engage in the debate and chart a course that let us meet the environmental goals of the ports, but do so in a way that provided flexibility to our businesses so that we could achieve environmental goals in an efficient and a cost-effective manner.
We discussed what CRT is all about, but what's it doing in this debate?
Well, first and foremost, CRT is based on the principle of collaboration. We are a collaborative group that facilitates dialogue with policymakers at the port level, at the state level, and at the federal level in developing clean truck programs across our country. One of our initiatives, of course, is to go into new ports around the country who are considering developing their own clean truck programs and bringing in industry perspective, helping them learn the lessons that we learned when the first clean truck programs in the country were being developed in Southern California. There was a lot of that we could take from that debate in Southern California and use it around the country. And what we've seen since then is we've developed clean truck programs in Oakland, Seattle, Tacoma, New York, New Jersey, and now we're developing programs that are as we move down the Atlantic coast and into the Gulf. So going into new communities, meeting with their stakeholders, listening to their concerns, and developing clean truck programs based on those concerns is one of our primary objectives. Another objective, of course, is as the attention towards goods movement policy has emerged at the congressional level, and now the federal government is considering looking at port-related laws, especially as they relate to port labor, we have begun a dialogue at the federal level as well. We felt that it was very important to engage policymakers on Capitol Hill and engage the administration on just not only the effects that changes to port-related federal law could have on the marketplace itself, but also the efforts of the individual members of the shipping industry on sustainability, because that was a story that wasn't necessarily being told. And so that remains one of our primary objectives, is to really highlight the initiatives that are being taken by our industry, by our individual members, and by industry as a whole, because the retail industry and their service providers have a fabulous story to tell on sustainability efforts. But that story doesn't always make it to policymakers, the media, and the public. And so that's our job as CRT, is to tell that story.
You mentioned some of the objectives that you have for 2010. I want you to elaborate on any objectives or initiatives that you have. And let me ask you this. How are these things, how are your aims and goals being met by the legislative community? Is anybody receptive to what you're saying on the state level, on the federal level?
Well, what we found is that, for many years, the assumption was that the retail or shipping industry would be opposed to any changes that would have environmental benefit that would cost them money. And that was a misconception that had proliferated, I think, in local port communities and certainly at the federal level. What we found, of course, is that the opposite was true, that many retailers and their service providers were already embracing sustainability practices. And what we've used CRT is as a way to coordinate those efforts to develop best practices. And one of the examples I'll give you for an initiative that we're working on in 2010, we have partnered with the EPA, the United States Environmental Protection Agency SmartWay program, to develop a rating model, a SmartWay certification, specifically for port trucking activities. And what this is doing is not only measuring the emissions reduction that's attributable to retailers and their service providers deploying green equipment, but is also providing market-based incentives, because we encourage our members to contract with SmartWay certified providers, so that when the largest shippers in any given port community are saying we prefer to use clean trucks and we prefer to work with providers who are bringing clean trucks to move our equipment, that has a way of moving the market very quickly.
Final question then. I'm a retailer or I'm a service provider to one. Tell me, why should I join the CRT?
Well, I appreciate the question, and really the bottom line is that this is a debate that has very important implications for the retail community. It's a debate where we need to be very focused and very proactive in our engagement, not only at the federal level, but our engagement in the port communities around the country. Our goal as CRT is to create viable and effective clean truck programs in every one of the ports across this nation, knowing that the success of industry-sponsored clean truck programs will mitigate the potentially more onerous and more costly regulations and legislation that could end up costing many-fold more than our efforts in deploying clean trucks. CRT is leading that effort. The breadth of CRT's membership gives us unprecedented credibility when we go in and dialogue, both at the local and federal level, by virtue of the fact that we are not a trade association that is specific to retailers or specific to the trucking community or specific to the ocean carrier community, but we represent all facets of the supply chain link. We're able to bring a breadth of experience and a breadth of initiative into our dialogue that very few other trade associations can capture. And for that reason, we've been extremely successful in partnering by virtue of the fact that we take a proactive approach to compliance on clean air issues. We take a collaborative approach with the community, with the environmental community, and with local policymakers. And that has given CRT unprecedented credibility and has really given us a reputation as pragmatic problem solvers, not just another industry trade association that digs in its heels at any new regulation, but an association of leaders who are committed to environmental stewardship. And if your company is committed to environmental stewardship and your company is actively embracing sustainability practices, CRT would be a perfect fit for your company.
Well, James, is a timely topic. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you very much, Russell.
James Jack, Coalition for Responsible Transportation, speaking with us today about leading the charge for cleaner ports and truck transportation. Thank you for watching.